Gotta run me up a 1-2 check. That's what I think when I hop out my bed. Gotta run me up a 1-2 check. When I wake up, I gotta get fed. Gotta run me up a 1-2 check. It's a new day, so some money I met. Gotta run me up a 1-2 check. Watch me do my dance, watch me do my step. Hi guys, and welcome to this week's episode of Knowledge Finder EDU. Today we've got another special guest in the building. Anthony, from the co-founder of Amosu Robinshaw, the defence solicitors based in South London, Croydon. Hi Anthony, how's it going?
Very well, thank you.
Thank you for coming down today. We've known each other for many, many years, so I thought you would be a great guest to have on the show to just share some gems as we normally do with our audience. We're going to touch on a few things today. So we'll start with a bit about yourself, a bit about what it's like being a solicitor in Croydon, especially in South London, as a black male, and others that may want to follow your footsteps. We're going to take a deep dive into what it takes to become a solicitor, to open your own practice, etc. So let's start from the top. How did you start your career journey?
My career journey was quite traditional in this year, to be honest with you. Namely, that I went to university, to keep it very brief. Went down the traditional route of studying for a law degree, finished my law degree, did a master's in criminology because I fluctuated for a while because I wanted to get into lecturing and become a lecturer for a while. And then I had another review, as people do. And then I went on, continued on the traditional path, which is the legal practice course. Nearly forgot this, quite some time ago now. So that's the LPC for short. Completed the LPC, managed to secure a training contract, which is what you needed. And I'll say needed because things have changed now, and I'll touch on that a bit later. Completed a training contract and then qualified 20 years ago. So I'm now 20 years qualified as a criminal defence lawyer.
So what made you want to transition from a lecturer to a criminal defence lawyer?
It was to become a lawyer. And then some of the subjects that I studied at university were quite interesting in terms of theoretical criminology, some small aspects of youth justice, also sociology of law. And given the fact that my background wasn't traditional lawyer route or mode, as it were, i.e. fantastic A-levels, and I had no aspirations of going into the city, and I really wanted to work with young people. I was and still am particularly interested in youth crime. I have a healthy own client following in relation to young people who manage to find themselves needing advice and assistance. So I thought at a time that I would like to lecture in criminology or youth justice. So that's the master's that I managed to successfully complete way back in the mid-90s. But then I looked at my position again and I said to myself, well, actually, I would like to practice. So that's what I did. I managed to secure a training contract with a local authority, which was excellent because I was able to have experiences of a variety of different areas of law, from contract law to family law, and even on the side of the local authority in terms of prosecution, such as noise abatement, where somebody's playing music too loud. The local authority, as you know, may turn up and ask somebody to turn it down. And if they don't, then they could be the subject of some type of investigation, various forms of allegations regarding housing benefit, and so on and so forth. Housing law. So it was great experience. I had all-round general knowledge by the time I finished my training contract. So it was then really for me to decide which area of law I wanted to practice. And there was a time when I potentially would have practiced family law because I don't know how much your viewers will know in terms of the local authorities' involvement in respect of childcare proceedings. Sometimes some children have to be removed from their environment. And I quite enjoyed that part of it as well, not in terms of removing children, but just in terms of the whole concept of the family law process. I found it quite interesting in terms of reports that needed to be prepared, liaising with social services, just the whole process. I mean, it's quite harrowing at times, from all sides, of course, but the process I quite enjoyed. But I think my heart and my passion lay in criminal defence. So I managed to secure a job as a criminal defence lawyer.
Yeah.
And here I am 20 years later, still practicing.
Wow, yeah, that's a great journey. So you say you managed to secure a job. How did you go from a job to starting your own company?
Well, I worked for a firm for nearly 2 years when I finished my training contract. So I managed to cut my teeth there. And I realised that at some point I wanted to work for myself. And I realised that I had the ability to become a partner, or in fact, I'm actually a director because we're a limited company, because you're able to do so when you run your own firm.
Yeah.
And I didn't actually set up a firm. I went to work for a firm who were practicing for 1 year.
Yeah.
So there were two guys together, and they had recently set up a firm in Vauxhall. So I went to work for them, and I was their first solicitor.
Yeah.
So, I mean, your viewers can't see the size of this room, but it was effectively the two of us, well, three of us in a room, I should say, the two directors, myself, a secretary that they'd just taken on, and also a paralegal that they had at the time. But it was cozy, to say the least. But then we subsequently grew, because I was fortunate to be working with two great individuals who had a fantastic own client following. I was in a room listening to them speaking to their clients, preparing their cases, and even the support staff that we had at the time, namely our secretary and also the paralegal, were relatively experienced. So it was a hotbed of activity in terms of the discussions.
Yeah.
I'd come back from court and I'd say, this is what happened. You know, Nick would come back and say, think about this. And I would say, well, that happened. And then Ola would say, well, think about that. And again, you know, Princess, the secretary, Chris, the paralegal, would all collectively have a discussion. It was a family. And you know, I realized that I was in the right place, to the extent where nearly 18 years later, well, in actual fact, 18 years later, this month, I'm still there.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm there in my capacity as a fellow director. So I stayed in the same place. And what we subsequently did was grow the firm as much as we could. We've gone through different incarnations at different times, but essentially the structure has remained the same, to provide advice and assistance for those who require it. Because, like it or not, everybody is entitled to representation. Yeah. It's not always the case that you would hear, that you may hear, I should say, in the media where, you know, this person shouldn't get representation, or it's awful and they've gone to trial and they've said this. The vast majority of cases actually end up in a guilty plea. Statistics will tell you that. So the vast majority of people plead guilty. And the reasons for pleading guilty usually are the evidence is overwhelming. Yeah. So they plead guilty. Some people want to plead guilty because they've committed the offence. And then after you've pleaded guilty, it's then the case that you have to be sentenced. So as advocates and as solicitors, we stand up and we present our mitigation to the sentencing court, whether or not it's in the magistrate's court or in the Crown Court, in front of a Crown Court judge, and then the sentence is passed down.
I'm with you.
That's the way it works. So we're processing with as much energy and as much passion as we can. It's not a case of trying to get somebody off. Yeah. The vast majority of people plead guilty. So it's about the sentence that they will get.
I'm with you.
And in regards to the sentence that they receive, judges or tribunals can only sentence in accordance with the power that they have. And if they sentence too hard, potentially a sentence can be appealed. So the vast, vast, vast majority of sentences are within range because sentencing tribunals have their hands tied in any event.
Interesting. So just before we move on, would you like to share the benefit of using your firm over, let's say, letting the police choose the duty solicitor for you?
Well, that's an interesting question because there's a misconception around the whole concept of a duty solicitor. Now, I act in my capacity at times as a duty solicitor. And what that simply means is that if you arrive at the police station, let's say you've never been in trouble before. Yeah. You have the option of requesting for legal representation. That can be by way of the duty solicitor scheme. It could be the case that you're a young person, you've turned up with your mother, she has a cousin who knows a solicitor. She may well have called her cousin. Her cousin has then called their own solicitor. Then their own solicitor will call the police station to say, we've been contacted by X with a view to representing Y, who's currently at the police station.
Yeah.
But sometimes you don't have somebody who you know.
Yeah.
So you can request the services of the duty solicitor. A duty solicitor is suitably qualified because they have to jump through various hoops. They have to pass certain exams. And while sometimes the actual duty solicitor on duty may not go out themselves, they will ask an agent to attend on their behalf. Everybody's suitably qualified.
Yeah.
So I would never belittle the duty solicitor scheme because I've met many of my long-standing clients via that route.
Yeah.
Whoever you have, it will still come down to the passion that they wish to expend in regards to representing that person. Sometimes a person at the police station, a suspect, I should say, can be quite difficult for a number of different reasons. Sometimes you may not gel for a number of different reasons.
Yeah.
But I don't really know of any solicitor or agent that would go down and purposely do a bad job or not care because it's a duty client, or else they just wouldn't do it. Because quite frankly, the funding is awful. So if you go because you want to do it, as opposed to you just do not care. But at the same time, if you have developed a relationship with somebody and you go down to represent that person you've represented before, you may know the traits of that individual. So the vast majority of my work now is own client.
Yeah.
By virtue of the fact that my phone will ring, some blah blah has recommended me to you, or it could be my own client who I've represented. And you have that relationship. So psychologically, of course, it may well be the case that they think they're going to get better service.
Yeah.
And possibly they will, possibly they won't. We always do our best for our clients as much as we can, whether or not it's a duty client or own client. Just so happens that our model is own client. So if we're not on duty, more often than not, our phone's ringing anyway.
Yeah.
You know, more often than not.
I'm with you.
So in conclusion, I would say anybody that requires representation, if they haven't got anybody they can call, they should use a solicitor, even if it's a duty scheme, because you should always have representation at the police station, always.
Okay. And you mentioned that funding's terrible, and a lot of people want to become solicitors and get into the field because it's conception that the money's great. Being a solicitor, lawyer, you make the big bucks. So is that true?
Well, if you are a publicly funded lawyer, that's not the case. It was the case. It was a fair wage 20 years ago or so, but the rates have not increased in the criminal defense field for 23 years, since 1998. Okay. So if you measure that, 1998 rates, 2021 now. Back then, when I went to university, I did not have to pay for it. It was state funded. I'd receive a grant. You could work part-time. So anybody who went to university had a chance of coming out of university without major debt or even debt, subject to where they were. You know, if you were living in London and you went to university in Newcastle, then you may find that you may accrue more costs or so on and so forth. As I was graduating, student loans were starting to come in. But when I first started university, there was no such thing as a student loan. You would receive a grant, subject to means, of course, but you'd always have your fees paid. That's my understanding. I mean, somebody may well correct me, but my understanding was up until around 1993 or so, you'd always have your fees paid at the very least. So if you think about that concept.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. I believe that even if your parents were wealthy, you'd have your fees paid. You may not receive a grant, but your fees would be paid.
I'm with you. So more like high school.
Indeed. So everybody had an opportunity to go. I know some quarters will argue that you still have an opportunity to go, but there was no debt attached to it.
Yeah.
Or not a high significant net. And then you come out of university, and if you went down the traditional route, you would have to undertake the legal practice course, the LPC, as I said. That would incur some debt if you wasn't fortunate enough to be sponsored by the firm that you were going in to work for. So that would have been in the region of that time, of 1990, sort of 6, 7. That would be around £5,500 to £6,000. And then you would support yourself if you were doing it full-time or part-time.
Wow.
And then again, just dealing with criminal defence, you would earn a salary that could potentially get you on your feet in regards to buying a property. A few years later, there was capacity to work overtime because, you know, you attend the police station out of hours, subject to the arrangement you would have with your firm. You could make up your salary, and the salary was very, very fair. So the salary now is exactly the same salary as it would be 20 years ago.
Okay.
However, the difference now is a lot of people, particularly those who end up choosing criminal defence work for different reasons, probably will have quite a significant debt. So the maths just, you know, it just doesn't really work out, because if you're paying for university fees, if you're paying to support yourself, and then you subsequently find a training contract in that area of work, which could invariably be around £18,000 to £20,000, then you qualify as a lawyer. You could qualify and earn in the region of, say, £26,000 to £27,000. You need to do the maths.
Yeah.
So that's why I say, sadly, the funding isn't great. So there's a real concern as you raise that point, because there's a worry that not enough people will enter the profession. Young people will come into the profession.
Yeah.
Unless they've got the financial backing of parent or guardian, and so on and so forth. So that's a real concern, because it's an aging profession, with the average age of a duty solicitor being 50 plus.
I see.
And nobody's coming through.
I see. I'm with you. So how comes the salaries are not bumped up for the junior staff, so they've got more of an incentive to get into the field?
Because it's government funded. So if the government doesn't fund it accordingly, then, and prices go up, rents go up, cost of living goes up.
Yeah, I'm with you.
It's difficult to say, okay, here's your salary. Here it is. It's a good salary.
Yeah.
You know, so there are real concerns about the profession at this time in terms of the state it will be in.
So if somebody did want to make large amounts of money, what area of law would you recommend? Well,
purely to answer your question, if they're seeking financial remuneration from the profession, then it's clear that company commercial work would be the way to go. If you're fortunate enough to work for a medium-sized firm or even a city firm, then the investment in your education is worth it. Because if you've got the talent, you're identified, and you manage to secure an opportunity to work in the city, then you can earn good money. You know, training contracts, not qualification, training contracts starting on sort of 45 to 50 grand plus.
Yeah.
And then when you qualify, of course, that should be, you know, in a region of possibly around £70,000, and then north of that.
Yeah.
So that's a great return on your investment for education. You know, and I'm pleased that there are some initiatives with some firms in the city that are taking their responsibility seriously in regards to diversity and pathways in which young people from marginalised communities can secure work placements, summer placements. And there are organisations that are liaising with major city firms who are investing in trying to put together programs and pathways to work for city firms. So that's good. If that's your aspiration, there are opportunities out there. You just need to seek them out. And, you know, get in touch with these organisations who can provide you with some guidance and assistance about the best way of approaching, you know, to try and fulfil the objective of entering into that area of law. But I have to say, in regards to my area of law, it has to be the most exciting area of law. You know, and you change lives. You can change lives, and you can save lives as well, which is very, very important, personally.
Yeah, let's take a deep dive into that then. So you're based in Croydon.
Yeah.
What is it like representing the black youth based in that area?
Well, I mean, we represent people all over the country, quite frankly. That's where we're based, but, you know, we have work everywhere.
I'm with you. Now, specifically talking about somewhere like Croydon that's notorious right now for many years.
It's sad that, you know, it has a degree of notoriety, quite frankly, because it's, you know, I live in the area. The area is fine as far as I'm concerned because I live in the area. You know, there are always pockets in every area, no matter where you are, that may have some difficulties for a number of different reasons. Whether or not there's an overrepresentation of kids that are excluded, and then they find themselves marginalized. Whether or not there's difficulties with drugs, whether or not there's difficulties with peer pressure. And you mentioned about the black youth. For me, it's more of a situation of urban youth, if I can put it that way as well, because I have a fair mixture of non-black young people too. It's just sad that when I go to various institutions, such as certain prison establishments, there is a high degree, particularly in London, of overrepresentation of black and brown young people in custody. It's a tragedy. It breaks my heart. You know, I went to a prison yesterday, in fact, and I went to see my client. It just so happens to be a young man as opposed to a youth.
Yeah.
And there were about 20 visitors in there, and 18 out of the 20 were black and Asian.
I'm with you.
So that, you know, that's akin to 90%. And it does break my heart.
Yeah, it is
but to answer your question in that regard, how does it feel? There's no moral mission per se, because I've always just done what I've needed to do. It was never a case of saying, right, I'm a role model or I want to be a role model, because to an extent, my time has come and it's almost going. You know, still young enough, but it's come and it's going. You still need to keep in touch with youth. And it's nice to give anybody the benefit of your experiences, of course.
Yeah.
But one thing I would take away from representing lots of young people generally is that when you're close to the action, there's a real chance you can get drawn into the action.
Yeah.
You know, young people make decisions that they will regret. Young people make decisions that they don't think about. There's most certainly a lack of consequential thinking skills. And when young people are being sentenced for a variety of different offences, it could be, you know, your most basic criminal damage, broke a window because they were bored, or a more serious type of offence, whatever that could be, a serious robbery. Sometimes within the pre-sentence report, which is a report prepared before sentence by the youth offending team, the youth offending team will make a recommendation that they would benefit from consequential thinking skills, that type of activity. Because I think all of us, no question, have made mistakes when we're younger. Whether or not we thought about the consequences at the time when we were doing whatever we were doing,
no, it's true.
It's a different story. And I don't necessarily mean crime. It could be anything at all, you know, in your life growing up, you know, the sort of events that would lead to potential convictions. They're still few and far between, because you could be at school and you've mouthed off to a teacher and then you've got detention. You think about it, actually you didn't want that detention because you've missed football training. You go home, your parents sanction you, they've taken away your phone. You wanted to be on your phone that evening. If you thought about it, you wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, I'm with you.
You know? So rehabilitation is at the heart of it. as far as I'm concerned. And whether or not it's Croydon or anywhere else throughout this country, it's just really a case of trying to expend your experiences.
So let's discuss the importance of rehabilitation then.
Rehabilitation, as I've alluded to, people make mistakes, but I do think that people deserve another chance as well. Yeah. And there's opportunities for you to start again. It's not as easy as it was for different reasons, because when you're in the system, sometimes it's very difficult for people to give you another opportunity.
Yeah.
For people to give you another chance. But when you're young and you make a mistake, you do have more bounce back ability, as it were, subject to how you wish to engage with any punishment that you will receive. So there are young people who make mistakes and then they go on and they live perfectly, fantastically good lives as citizens. There are people that are sometimes older that have made mistakes. Could argue they possibly should have known better, but they still made a mistake and they've acknowledged it, and then they've gone on. And again, they've gone into careers and professions. And sometimes the more older people I find want to come back and impart their knowledge and their experiences to younger people. Yeah. So that said young people don't make mistakes or the same mistakes. But as I mentioned, people will make mistakes. But I think rehabilitation is important. And if someone is receptive to rehabilitation, I do think you should be afforded an opportunity. So I do believe it's important.
And how would somebody go about improving, consequential thinking at a younger age instead of making a mistake? What would you say is a way to actually improve that skill?
Well, in that context of sentencing and with the youth offending team or youth offending service, working with that young people, there are various exercises and various discussions that they will have, taking the time to think about the consequences of actions if you've verbally assaulted somebody or physically assaulted somebody, and the knock-on effect of family and so on and so forth. I think it's a matter of taking your time with that young person to see whether or not they can consider what they've done.
Yeah, that's a bit too late. How can an individual improve their skills at home by themselves? When they're in the heat of the moment, then they think in the heat of the moment rather than reacting and thinking afterwards.
It's, there's so many different arguments to this. Should more be done at home? Should parents take more of a responsibility? Should schools take more of a responsibility? Sometimes I think it's about individual circumstances. It's not a one-size-fits-all scenario, because it may be the case that parents have a bit more capacity and a bit more time to spend with their young person, right? But again, you don't know what the dynamics are in that household. You don't know what the relationship is like. Parents may want to reach out, they can't. Kids may want their parents to reach out and they don't. You're going to have some fantastic teachers in schools who really go the extra mile. You have some teachers that are up against it because of a lack of resources, and invariably that is the case. They want to give their all to their young students, but they can't always do so because they're bogged down in bureaucracy and paperwork. So it's very difficult, but it's not a one-size-fits-all situation. I think we just generally all have a responsibility, if we can, to just keep an eye out for our young people. And say, look, if you ever need a helping hand with anything, give me a call. So if it's your nephew, if it's your nephew's friend, if it's your cousin, if it's your brother, whoever it is, if we're in a position where we can just literally have one conversation with them, that could be the conversation. So people call me all the time. Can you speak to my whoever about, can you offer work experience, I should say. That's the classic. And I used to offer work experience, but I don't offer work experience anymore because the dynamics of my organisation has changed. But what I find which is useful is that I may say, okay, I can't give you work experience, but I'll speak to my colleagues at court to see whether or not you can go and shadow them for a couple of hours.
Yeah.
Or let me have a 20-minute conversation with you. That might help you. So I also do work for an organisation called Urban Synergy, who are a mentoring organisation based in South East London. And what we were doing throughout lockdown was organising Zoom or Teams conversations with young people who were being mentored by mentors in the organisation. So whilst I used to be a mentor, quite frankly, I don't have the time for it in terms of the consistent weekly content that you need.
Yeah.
But I was part of conversations with young people who had aspirations of coming into law. So that half an hour conversation that we will have hopefully will be useful so that they can make the decision as to what they want to do and how they want to come into the profession, whether or not it's the traditional route, or as I touched on earlier, I'll talk about the new way of qualifying, which is completing what's known as the SQE, which is Solicitor's Qualifying Exam.
So how long does the SQE take to complete this, and what do you need to onboard?
Well, the SQE has just been rolled out this year, and I do believe the first exam will be in November of this year. So the criteria is that you need to have the equivalent of a law degree or level 6 of SILEX, which is Chartered Institute of Legal Executives, various units within that particular field of study or qualification, I should say.
So is that an alternative to a university degree?
Yeah, exactly that. So you don't have to traditionally a university. You could just go onto any search engine and just type in SILEX, CILEX. And that might be a way that you could obtain your units for the first part.
Yeah.
Then you need to have 2 years qualifying work experience, QWE, I think it is.
So is the SILEX enough to get you a job?
The SILEX, you could be a legal executive anyway.
Okay.
And that's a great job. It's a great qualification, right? SILEX is enough for you to just work as part of the profession, be more experienced than solicitors, quite frankly, in some scenarios.
Yeah.
That would be great. Alone, because usually with the SILEX, it means you're working and studying in the evening anyway, or day release. But then you'll need 2 years qualifying work experience, which could be working as a paralegal, legal assistant, and so on and so forth. And as long as the organisation that you've been working for will assist you by signing it off, then that would qualify, but you need 2 years. Then you need to pass parts 1 and part 2 of the SQE. So that would be a whole range of legal subjects. And then lastly, suitability and character test as well.
Okay, so how long is part 1 and part 2 in terms of study hours, would you say?
It's new. I haven't, I don't know a huge amount about it. It's just personal interest because young people, hopefully that will come into the profession. I'll need to know about it.
Yeah.
But I believe on average, you're probably having to undertake, say, 15 to 16 hours per week of study, probably over a 9 to 10 month period of time for each part. But this is distance learning. I'm sure there are organisers who are, or providers who are, putting on day refresher courses or whatever the case may be. But, you're essentially on your own. It's a multiple choice exam, but you need to learn the theory. By all means, from the limited reading I've done, by all means, it's no walk in the park. It's a huge amount of work. It can be done because everything can be done. There's no question about that, but it's a huge amount of work. But it gives people, crucially, particularly in my area of the profession, it gives people who are marginalised, who struggle to find the money, the opportunity to study at their own pace. I mean, they'll have to pay for the exam potentially, but they can study at their own pace. They don't have to do it that year. They could prepare for 2 years if they wanted to, but they're studying at their own pace. Potentially they're working. They can get the time written off as opposed to having an official training contract, which was previously required. And then they could potentially qualify.
So they can basically take themselves from just being at home, knowing nothing about law, to doing the first set of studies. And how long would you say that takes to do the prereqs?
Some people may wish to go to university and still have a law degree. And good luck to them. Totally understand that. And I completely get it. Some people just want suit. Some people say, I prefer to just take the SILEX route or whatever equivalent qualification gets you through.
For our viewers, the SILEX route would be very interesting because you could take yourself from actually knowing nothing about law, dedicate the time and actually end up fully qualified and open your business?
Well, I'm hoping,
that's what knowledge find is about, basically.
I'm hoping Silence will sponsor me now, bearing in mind the plug I've given them. But, I actually undertook Silence units myself later on in my career because I went back to college to study because I also qualified as a notary public, which is a separate offshoot qualification of the legal profession, where essentially I authenticate the individual for international transactions. So I do some international work in that aspect. Yeah. So I had to go back as part of my training and the prerequisites to study and to qualify as a notary public. I had to go back and do some Silex units.
Yeah.
And it was distance learning, and it was tough. It wasn't easy, but at the same time, it was manageable in the sense that, you had feedback and, you could study at your own pace. And yes, it was units each week leading up to the exams, but you could go as hard as you wanted to, or you could cram, whatever your style is. Yeah. So, that's an alternative consideration. And again, it's designed so that the SQE is there for people who ordinarily would not have the opportunity or as much as an opportunity to qualify as a lawyer.
I'm with you.
To have that opportunity. Okay. It's important.
Definitely is. No, I definitely agree. And like I say, with Knowledge Finder, for multiple professions, I call them the hidden professions, we're trying to shed some light on different professions you may not have heard of or heard about in school, and you only ever get the chance to see once you actually start working. Even the ways of getting these jobs, unless you go to university, it may be totally so unclear to you as to what other routes there are available. So it's good to hear of different routes for different industries and different fields. Before we close, there's a final few questions that I have. One of them is, why would you say there's such a lack of black CEOs in the UK?
Lack of black CEOs. Now, when you say CEOs, are you referring to larger corporations, or are you talking on a
large to medium size?
Large to medium size. Yeah. I think everything is evolutionary. I think it comes with time. I know there are initiatives happening to try and propel black, talented individuals within organisations to reach that point. It's clear it's not happening fast enough. And the reasons for that are well debated. I'm not sitting on the fence, they're just hard. I don't really like to go on and on about things that have been rightfully and properly and well argued in regards to various forms of discrimination or reasons as to why we are not where we are supposed to be. Personally, I do what I need to do. It's as simple as that. And personally, I'm a great believer in doing for self. So whilst it's the case where, yes, it would be only right and justified that we're supposed to be in certain positions based on work that has rightfully been done, don't just put somebody there just because of what they look like. Earn your credentials.
I'm with you.
And I suspect that every black person, women, marginalized communities, or people that are in different categories for whatever reason, do not want the favor of just being put there. They want to earn the right to be there, but they want a fair opportunity in respect of the selection process. I get that totally. And if that's the way you're heading, it's only right. But as I say, sometimes you just need to look around, see where you are, and make the decision as to what you'd like to do. So with what you're doing here with Knowledge Finder, you're creating content, hopefully to educate people from all walks of life, whoever, it doesn't matter, to say, okay, this is what I would like to do, and I want to try and build something. And by virtue of building something, I can use this source of information, education, get to the next stage, build my business, grow my business, branding, marketing, etc., to the point where you are CEO of your own company, where you don't have to worry about what others are doing. You can block out the noise. Yeah. You can simply look around and say, well, okay, this organization, It'd be nice if there was, but actually it doesn't matter because I've got my own.
Yeah.
It takes time. It's not pie in the sky, far from it. You know, it's an achievable aspiration, but people need to be patient. And when I say patient, is when they're building their own brand, understand it won't be overnight.
Yeah.
It will take some time, but you can get there. So I may have deviated slightly from answering your question in terms of why isn't it the case that there are more? Whilst I'm interested, I'm not interested. Interested, but not interested. Because I'm more focused on young people coming through, developing their brand, growing, and in 10 years' time, they're CEO of their own brand and their own company. They don't have to look elsewhere for comparisons. They're just concentrating on doing what they need to do and then feeding it back into the community. That, for me, is the most important thing.
I agree. No, I think that's a great answer. So next I'd like to ask you, is there somebody that's, I don't know, they're making money from some way, but they have no legitimate business, no real education. What's your advice to somebody like that?
When you say legitimate,
it's just, they have no job. They just do odd bits and bobs to earn a living, but they're intelligent.
Yeah.
But they have no formal education behind them.
Okay, so there's two aspects to this, right? If it was the case where someone's committing crime, don't, right? That's the first thing. And I know that's not what you mean, but people do whatever they do. I'm not the judge of anybody. People are doing whatever they do. So I just put that out there because, you know, you can do things the right way, right? Because young people are so talented. They're, you know, it may be seen glamorous on social media, the way people sort of flash about money or whatever the case may be. It's all an illusion, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But the young person I believe you're talking about is the young person that has a fantastic talent and they just need some support. You know, they don't know how to sort of go about structuring their business. You know, they've got fantastic content online and they need some help and they need support and so on and so forth. These are the places, your platform, these are the places that they need to be studying in great depth in terms of guidance as to what they need to do next. So if they've got a product online, I'm sure there are people that they can reach out to say, I need help, I need assistance. There are organizations in the community where, and on a very basic level, actually, even if it's government schemes, where you can contact them and say, look, I have an idea, I need some type of mentoring. Then there will be business mentors that you could speak to, and then you can have an idea. Because it's not just about a formal school education. You know, that will almost be a thing of the past, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Good entrepreneurial skills is essential because those same individuals who may not have had a formal school education will probably be the ones who could handle themselves in business a lot better than those who have been sheltered. Because if they're out there selling their product, let's say there's somebody out there selling CDs. I know it's an old concept now, CDs, but that's what used to happen. You know, you used to be out and about, look, I've got CDs or whatever. But the people skills that they had, the one-to-one skills were fantastic because they were selling, right? It's just how you can monetize that. You know, it's how you can just sort of set yourself up in terms of your limited company and then, you know, what comes from that, your responsibilities. And then you take on a member of staff and your responsibilities as an employer and so on and so forth. But there are organizations out there that can help young people or any individual who wish to formalize their business idea so that they could grow. So I would say in conclusion, just look around, ask people, go online, on the internet, there's a wealth of information, and don't be scared. You need to try.
Okay, thank you very much. And finally, you said if people are doing crimes, just stop. But what if there is a guy that's doing some crimes, he's making a fair amount of money, but he doesn't want to stop to earn a low wage? What would you say to this guy? With your experience, 20 years plus in the field, is there anybody that, with your experience, that you know that actually makes it to the other side successfully?
No, quite frankly. I know there is the illusion that you went from this to that. Yeah. But the vast majority of people don't. I don't hardly know of any, and, that I can actually say, wow, he was this and now he's that. You know, at some point it catches up. It just does. You know, and if it doesn't catch up with you financially, it catches up with you psychologically. You don't know who to trust. You're looking over your shoulder all the time. You're a bit paranoia. To an extent, you're marginalized as well. You know, it can be a bit of a mess.
Yeah.
Quite frankly. And I'm not here to judge anybody. You know, I'm in the business of providing advice and assistance to people that need it, you know, in that aspect of life. All right. And all I can do is advise them as to, in respect of the situation that they find themselves in and the law, you know. So everything's fact specific. Someone's been accused of X. This is the law Y. Let's have a conversation about it. How does it apply to you? And then we look at whether or not there are any defenses available to you by virtue of your instructions, or whether or not the evidence seems pretty overwhelming and you may have to consider entering a plea. But it's only advice. I can't tell people what to do. It's only advice, you know? So I just, you know, we're the conduit in the middle in terms of providing advice and assistance. But again, answering your question, you know, people do whatever they do, right? But I invariably find that those who partake end up okay, as it were. There's always some knock-on effect somewhere along the line. So it's just a matter for that person in terms of whatever they decide to do, you know? It's a difficult question to answer because this is society and this is life and people do whatever they need to do or whatever they feel they need to do, rightly, wrongly, or whatever the case may be. But as a lawyer, we're there to provide advice and assistance in that particular field. And then people can either take the advice or not.
I'm with you. So where could people find you for advice?
Well, people want to find me advice. I work for a firm called Amosu. So it's Amosu Robinshaw. That's a bit of a mouthful, but that was after the two directors who started the firm. I'm Anthony Graham. You search me online, you'll find me.
Okay, thank you very much, Anthony, for coming down and sharing some gems with us, especially about how to actually get into the field without going to university. That is very interesting. I'm sure many people would, that's new knowledge for them. It's new knowledge for me. So yeah, thank you very much. And thank you guys at home for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Follow us on Instagram and share all of our videos. Gotta run me up a 1-2 check. That's what I think when I hop out my bed. Gotta run me up a 1-2 check. When I wake up, I gotta get fed. Gotta run me up a 1-2 check. It's a new day, it's some money I met. Gotta run me up a 1-2 check. Watch me do my dance, watch me do my step.